Just a quick reminder before we get into the lesson to download the hands-on lab exercises that accompany this full CCNA course. I'll include the link in the description. Also, remember to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of the lessons in the course. Okay, let's get into it. In the last lecture, you learned how to configure SNMP version 3. In this lecture, you'll actually see how to do it with a live lab demo. So I've got my lab topology open here. You can see it's really simple. I've got my router R1, which has got the SNMP agent running on there. It's got IP address 10.0.0.1, which is facing towards the SNMP manager, which is my NMS server. My SNMP manager has got IP address 10.0.0.100. It's on the same IP subnet, and that's actually the computer that I'm working on right now. So on my SNMP manager, I've installed my SNMP software on there. I'm using the PRTG network monitor, which is a well-known NMS system. You can use this yourself if you want to as well, if you want to have a play about with it. There's a freeware version of it. What I've done so far is I've installed the software, and then I've tried to connect to my router at 10.0.0.1 via SNMP to manage it. And you can see that that has failed. I've got my error message here right now. The reason is that I've not configured SNMP on my router. I'm going to be using SNMP version 3. I haven't configured my SNMP settings, the username, on the server here either. So that's why it's failing. So let's get that set up. So I will jump onto the router. You can see that right now, the only configuration I've got on there is I've configured the IP address on the interface facing towards the server. So let's configure SNMP version 3. So I do that at global config. So the command is config-t to get there. And then I'll configure my SNMP group first. So the SNMP commands all start with snmp-server. My router isn't actually an SNMP server. It's an SNMP agent. But these are the settings that are going to allow it to communicate with an SNMP server. So snmp-server, and I'm going to create my group. I'll call this FLACKBOX'S-group for my example. I'm going to be running SNMP version 3, and I'm just going to go with the default settings here, where I'm going to set a security level of AlphaPrep. So the router and the NMS system are going to authenticate with each other, and the NMS system is going to have full read-only access to my router. I'm not configuring any views or any access list or anything here at the group level. So I hit enter there, and that is my SNMP group for version 3 set up. The other thing I need to do is to configure my user, which is going to be a member of this group, and it's the user that's also going to get configured on the SNMP server. So to do that, I start off with snmp-server again. Now I'm configuring the user. The username I'm going to use for this example is FLACKBOX-user. Then I say the group it's going to be a member of, which is the one I just created, which is FLACKBOX-group. Then I specify that it's SNMP version 3, and then I need to configure my authentication settings. So I start off with the keyword of auth. I'm going to use SHA rather than MD5 authentication. I'll use a password of auth-password in all caps. And that's my authentication settings done. Next, I need to configure my encryption settings. That starts with priv for privacy. I will use AES, 128-bit encryption, and I'll use a password of priv password. So that's it done. That's my SNMP server group and my SNMP server user configured on the router. You can see I get a confirmation message there saying that it's been encrypted. Next thing I need to do is I need to configure matching settings over on my SNMP manager, my server as well. So let's jump back over there. I will cancel out of the old error message and go to my devices here. Here's the router here, and I need to add the credentials. So I'm going to do that at the subnet level for this example. So I will click on the subnet that the router is in, and then go to the settings and scroll down here, and I'm looking for the credentials for SNMP devices. Obviously, the way that you configure this is going to be dependent on the actual software that you're using for your SNMP server, and that's not going to be tested on the CCNA exam. I'm just using this as an example here. So I'll go to the SNMP credentials. In PRTG, it defaults to using version 2. We are using version 3, so I will select that. For the authentication, we'd configured the router to use SHA authentication, and the user is FLACKBOX'S-user, and the password was all caps off password. The encryption type we'd configured was AES, and the priv key was priv password. Don't need to configure any context, and I can leave the defaults for everything else. So I will save that now. And then if I go back to the router again, and I'll try to add that SNMP sensor again so that it can gather information from SNMP. So I go to the sensor types. I'm looking for SNMP traffic so that my server here can gather networking information from the router via SNMP. I'll click on it now. This is where it was failing before when I didn't have matching credentials configured. And now you can see that my NMS system has discovered the router. It sees the 4 different fast Ethernet interfaces on there, and I could now go and complete the configuration, and it would monitor the traffic going through that router. Okay, so that's it. That's how you configure SNMP version 3. See you in the next lecture. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to get the complete course ad-free right now, then you can click on the link above my head or in the description to enroll in my CCNA Gold Bootcamp. It also includes full study notes, quizzes, and 150 pages of additional troubleshooting labs you can't find anywhere else.